I'll carry on in the meantime, and hopefully Richard will be able to join in a sec. So yeah, sorry about the technical issues, everyone. So yeah, by way of introduction, I've already said, but we're just going to be talking about the invertebrate diversity of wildflower verges in Rhondda and Taff. So a little bit of background on roadside verges, and I'm sure some of this has probably already been covered in the previous talk, but road verges cover quite a large extent of land within Wales, so about 10,000 hectares. And we know that they're valuable habitats in their own right for a number of different things, including plants and invertebrates, fungi and so forth. But these also act as really important linear pathways in the landscape to what we might call pollinator highways. So they connect together otherwise isolated habitat patches and allow species to move freely within the landscape, which is obviously really important. And local authorities are in a really unique position, really, in order to sort of help and safeguard our native pollinators and wildlife because of their wide-ranging responsibilities and their services and the amount of land that they own as well. And as was mentioned in the previous talk, safety concerns regarding roadside verges will always sort of take precedence over biodiversity. But in my opinion, at least, I think there's significant scope to manage our roadside verges in ways that sort of better increase habitat diversity and offer greater benefits, not just to pollinators, but to other wildlife as well. So we have a number of sort of wildflower-rich verges within Rhondda and Taff, and until fairly recently, these weren't really included within any sort of biodiversity sort of management schemes. This is one of the road verges that I'm going to talk about today. So this is Ford Kevin Hendy, which is in Miskin. So these are sort of long, rather narrow road verges, and rather typical of a lot of roadside verges within Rhondda and Taff, and as you can see, very sort of flower-rich, sort of species-rich, neutral grassland sort of habitat. We also have some other sort of different sort of road verges within Rhondda and Taff as well. So things like this one here, which is part of the Church Village Bypass Road, which is another one that I'm going to talk in more detail about later on. And these particular road verges are a lot wider than the other road verges typical of the county. So on these larger ones, this is where the council can get in, cut and collect machinery, so large-scale machinery that can cut the vegetation, collect up the horizons, which is really important in order to keep the nutrient levels low and encourage diverse plant communities. Whereas on those sort of smaller verges will be very much more smaller machinery, might be a bit more difficult to collect. And this is the machinery that Rhondda and Taff Council have recently purchased. So this is the cut and collect sort of track machinery that they use, which is obviously very efficient at cutting the material and collecting up the horizons, which are stored in the back of the machine. And then these then can be tipped then within sort of the corners of areas. So if it's roadside verge, they can be tipped in the corner and then create additional habitat for things like grass snake, which will use those sort of mounds of decaying vegetation then for egg laying. And lots of other invertebrates will also use those mounds of vegetation as well. So this is sort of one investment that Rhondda and Taff have taken recently, showing their really commitment, I suppose, to managing road verges much more sensitively. Of course, this is quite a large machine, so road verges need to be sufficiently wide in order to get this in. So it's not available to every sort of road verge within the county, but where possible, this is used then, and being a track machine as well, it sort of reduces the damage as well that's done in sort of cutting up the ground. But any sort of disturbance that it does make is beneficial to a lot of invertebrates, so things like solitary bees that require bare ground to nest in as well. So Rhondda and Taff Council have been sort of reviewing the way that they manage their roadside verges, and part of this was a study that I'm going to talk about in shortly. And they've adopted a road verge policy rather recently. I think it was last year that they came through. So it was approved by the councillors, and it means now that Rhondda and Taff have sort of designated biodiversity verges. So these are ones that where the mowing regime has been reduced. So instead of being mown rather frequently. They might get cut only once a year, and it's usually as late as possible, so ideally sort of October time. Or the mowing is reduced then rather, so it's not as frequent as it used to be. So we're giving these opportunities then for the plant species to come through and supporting, of course, the invertebrates and other wildlife as well. In RCT, we're very passionate about encouraging the native flora, so encouraging the natural seed bank. So we don't do any sort of planting as such on roadside verges, so it's all about encouraging the native flora that's already there. And I think that's a really important thing, and it does really concern me that some councils, I don't want to kind of name and shame too many of them, but one example is Swansea, where they at least they used to anyway in recent years use a non-native plant species, and they sort of plant them up and they cover the area in glyphosate, horrible weed killer beforehand, sow the seeds, and then next year they do the same and douse it all in chemicals and then plant the seeds again. So in RCT, we're all about just encouraging the native seed bank that's already there, and I think that's really important. Well, basically the important thing that we should be doing anyway. And this is, on the picture here, you've got kind of what RCT are doing at the moment. So instead of mowing like an entire bank like this on the side of the road when there was not really any need, they're looking now to just mow sort of just the edges, to sort of maintaining that safety barrier, I suppose. So maintaining the visual visibility that you need on the road, but also encouraging biodiversity as well. And it's a shame Richard's not actually here to talk about this, because this is Richard pictured on the left here. And Richard has been monitoring his local roadside verge, which is in Miskin, for a number of years. And in his garden, which is literally just a few meters away from this road bank, he has over 60 different species of bee in his garden, and includes some of Wales's rarest and the UK's rarest species as well. So one of those species is the longhorn bee, which is pictured here, which actually forages on the roadside verges within Miskin. So we know by Richard's literally sampling his garden over the years that there is a lot of interest within these roadside verges. And through the study that I'm going to talk about next, we've literally just looked at a small sample of sites at one sort of point within time. But we know that there's sort of this high biodiversity value associated with roadside verges. And it just goes to show that when you put that survey effort in, that it can reveal a whole diversity of different species, including rather rare and declining species like the longhorn bee as well. So my part of the talk was really focusing on the invertebrate surveys. So back in 2017, I started to conduct invertebrate surveys that were commissioned by Rhondda and Council. And I looked at 2 roadside verges in the south of the county, and the real aim of these surveys was to identify what pollinator species, but not just pollinators, but other invertebrates as well, that are exploiting the new habitat that's been made available by the more sensitive management of roadside verges. So we're looking at those roadside verges that were previously heavily mown, and then those that had a more relaxed mowing regime, and kind of seeing what species were taking advantage of the new habitat that's been made available. So each of these 2 verges were visited once per month between the months of June and September. So the road verges were visited 4 times in total, and a variety of different sampling techniques were used in order to target as many different invertebrates as possible, but particularly representatives within the Coleoptera, which are the beetles, the Diptera, which are the flies, the Hemiptera, which are the true bugs, and the Hymenoptera, which includes the bees and the wasps as well. So 2 of those verges are ones that I pictured earlier. So the first of these is the Church Village bypass, so the A473. This is a rather recent road verge. So this road opened in 2010 and connects Llantriston to Tree Forest, and it bypasses Church Village, hence the name, but also other villages as well, like Llantris Bardra and Tonteg. And these are rather wide verges, as you can see. And these road verges can be characterized really as marshy grassland habitat, as you can see in the image here. And if you know your vegetation communities, this is N23. So it's got things like greater birds-foot trefoil, common fleabane, and other sort of thistles and other sort of marshy grassland plant species as well. And here is like a Google Earth sort of image of the Church Village bypass, or at least part of it. So you can see that between the two roundabouts there, this is all the Church Village bypass. And it was built through an area, a green belt, to the south of these villages. And it was built through, as you can see, a network of marshy grassland habitats. So to the south and east of that road, you can see that there's a network of fields, and these are all sort of marshy grassland fields. And the darker areas are where it's particularly marshy and sort of roughy. So you can see that these roadside verges, they're effectively creating this connectivity between the marshy grasslands to the east and the west, and they're also connecting this marshy grassland to habitats to the north as well. So they're providing really important connectivity. And we focused on three sort of areas within this sort of large bypass road. So we focused on these three different coloured areas here, with particular emphasis on the area in white there, which supported the greater sort of species diversity in terms of plants. So we sampled those three areas there. And then our second road verge, as I mentioned earlier, which is Ford, Kevin, Hendy and Miskin. This is a species-rich neutral grassland habitat, or MG5 grassland, supporting plants like common knapweed, common birds-foot trefoil, vetches, clovers and buttercups. And these are much more typical of RCT road verges, so nice long and narrow ones, unlike the last ones which are very wide. And this is just an image to show where those roadside verges are. So you've got the Ford, Kevin, Hendy road is between the two roundabouts, and then the yellow area and the red area are the two little sections of roadside verge that I sampled. And this sort of satellite image shows that what looks to be a very wooded environment, but in fact this is an area of much sort of quarrying, where we've got some nice sort of calcareous, sort of typical brownfield grassland, and there are also some real nice species-rich neutral grasslands in the area as well, particularly at the local cemetery as well. So what these roadside verges are doing is providing connectivity to those quarry areas and to some other sort of more fragmented areas of species-rich neutral grassland that are found in the area. And the results of the survey were rather promising. So recorded 145 invertebrate species on the Church Village bypass, and 93 different species at Ford, Kevin and Hendy. So in total, this was 191 unique species across the two sites. And as you might imagine, the Coleoptera, Diptera, Hemiptera and Hymenoptera, which were the target groups, were the ones that were found to support the most species. There's no surprise there, because that's just reflective of the survey effort. But what I kind of really want to kind of draw your attention to really is the fact that a lot of roadside verge management is done with an emphasis on pollinators, but it's not just pollinators that benefit from this work. So as well as, of course, the plant species, you get a whole variety of other invertebrates as well. And particularly true bugs is kind of what I want to draw your attention to here, because they represented 40% of the invertebrate species that we recorded. And these true bugs are plant feeders, so they're feeding on things like the actual stems and the roots and the leaves and the seeds and that sort of thing. So they're not necessarily using it as a sort of forage resource in the same way as pollinating insects would. So this is really reflective, I think, of the high sort of plant diversity that was found on these roadside verges. And it does kind of go to show that it's not just all about bees and butterflies, and there's a whole other plethora of other insects as well that benefit. There's things like beetles and grasshoppers and crickets and so forth. And a lot of these are not generally considered when we're sort of maintaining road verges for wildlife. So it's a rather decent species total that, of course, is by no means sort of comprehensive. So this is just a snapshot in time. So it was just happened to be what was there at the time I was there, with the time and resources that I had available to do the survey work as well. So we know that this figure is going to be a lot greater in reality, but it does go to show the diversity of insect life that can be found on these sites. And included in this then was 8 species of conservation importance. So these are localized rare, scarce or rare data book species that are considered of conservation importance at the UK level, and the same would be the case in Wales as well. So there was 4 of these species on the Church Village bypass, and 5 of these species at Ford Kevin and Hendy, with the brown-banded carnaby recorded across 2 of the sites, so 8 in total. So this really does show that these roadside verges don't just support common and widespread species, but they have an opportunity to support some of the UK's sort of rarest and most threatened species. So it's really kind of exciting, I suppose, that just a randomly selected sites, randomly selected points across these road verges to support these priority species. And I'm just kind of going to go through some of those species now. So I briefly mentioned the brown-banded carnaby. So this is a nationally scarce species that's considered a priority for conservation under Section 7 of the Environment Wales Act. So this is a species that's undergone a widespread decline and been lost from a lot of areas of England and Wales. In South Wales, we're rather lucky that we've still managed to support our brown-banded carnaby populations, and they do quite well in the area. But it's really nice that this declining species is utilising both of the roadside verges that we looked at within Rhondda and Path. Some other groups are not particularly looked at on roadside verges are beetles. So we managed to find this rather attractive looking Cuculio beetle. There's ones with these really large rostrum or snout. And this is quite a small species that's associated with birches. So this is a species that's obviously benefiting from self-established scrub on roadside verges, which goes to show that having that habitat diversity on roadside verges is important, and allowing some areas to develop small amounts of scrub is important, but of course there has to be within moderation to ensure that the road verge doesn't become entirely dominated by scrub and woodland. But this was a nice sort of nationally scarce species to find. Also had Lesnie's earwig, which is another nice sort of nationally scarce species that's not known from a large number of sites within Wales. And this was found on Ford Kevin and Hendy, largely because there was old man's beard or clematis growing within the roadside verge. So this is a species that's largely associated with that plant, and that's why it was turning up on the roadside verge. We also had this very attractive looking bug, which is Adelphocorus quadripunctatus, and this is a species of true bug that was found new to Britain back in 2016 from the Church Village bypass. So it's no surprise that it happened to turn up during our sampling of the Church Village bypass, seeing as this was the site in which it was found new to Britain. And it was thought initially to be a newly established species from the continent, but it's actually turned out to be a native species that's been overlooked since the 1880s. We also had some sort of less sort of scarce species, but still quite interesting ones. So things like the horned tree hopper. So this is one of just 2 species of tree hopper within Britain, and it's got these rather impressive horns on the side of the thorax that almost look like ears. Yeah, and this is by no means scarce, but it's quite a localized species, so you don't tend to see it hugely commonly. But you tend to find that around sort of scrub and sort of woodland edge sort of habitats. Also had some really nice looking shield bugs as well. So the woundwort shield bug, which was found on the Church Village bypass, was particularly nice find because it's not known from many places within Wales, particularly within South Wales. So that was a really nice species to have, and as the name suggests, is associated with the plant woundwort. And we also had perhaps what is one of the most attractive British shield bugs as well, which is the blue shield bug, which is a really attractive species. And it's rather typical of roast pasture and marshy grassland habitats, so it was no real surprise that this turned up on the Church Village bypass. But it's a real nice species that you don't see sort of every day, so that was a really nice one to get. So that was just a little bit of a guide through on some of the species that we encountered on this rather brief survey. So a nice diversity of different things, including some rather nice species as well. But kind of what I want to talk to you next is about lockdown, or lockdown 1.0, the very first lockdown, which was a very sort of scary time for a lot of people. and a lot of people were out on furlough, and it meant that a lot of industry shut down, and a lot of services that were normally delivered by the council stopped. And one of those was the management of roadside verges and green spaces. So within Rhondda and Taff, the grass cutting sort of team weren't active for those several months during the first lockdown, and it gave this amazing opportunity to our native wildlife. And I'm just going to guide you through some of the local sort of green spaces around me and roadside verges that I managed to photograph during lockdown, and kind of what I'm going to just talk about sort of what lockdown has really taught us as well. So the first of those verges is this rather impressive verge within a housing estate in Tinnebryn near Tonrevel. So this is a verge that was regularly mown for no real need, I suppose. But during the spring, when the mowing team wasn't out, it developed this amazing display of cuckoo flower and dandelions as well, which no doubt was really important for things like sort of green-veined white and orange-tip butterflies and other insects that use these cuckoo flowers. And then another roadside verge just around the corner from this was this rather attractive but small sort of roadside verge in Thomastown. And this had a flowering bugle, which is a really nice plant and a really attractive plant to bumblebees in particular. So in early spring, when this was flowering, it was really good for queen bumblebees, and particularly red-tailed bumblebees and garden bumblebees, which are pictured here, but also a number of different solitary bees as well. This is a green space now, so this is a park within Colliery, which is my home village. And you can see in the foreground here, this is the sort of entrance to the park, and you've got quite a nice display of cuckoo flower and dandelions, and some of which is not visible in the picture. And in the background there, you've got a children's playing area, which is, of course, during lockdown, all locked up, and so it wasn't being mown regularly like it was before. And again, this sort of developed a really nice display of cuckoo flower and dandelions. So it was really showing that a lot of our green spaces are naturally flower rich. And just round the corner from that, on a roadside verge there, on this steep bank, is this lovely patch of devil's bitscabious, and every year for at least the last few years, this patch of devil's bitscabious has been mown by the council before it's had a chance to flower and set seed, which has been really disappointing. But this year it's managed to survive mowing. So this was pictured just a few weeks ago when it was still flowering. So that's really nice, and a nice sort of outcome from lockdown. I don't know whether the staff just forgot about mowing it because of lockdown, I'm not sure. But it's really, really nice. A lot of the roundabouts as well were particularly flower rich in RCT. So this is one by the Royal Glamorgan Hospital, and you can see a lovely display here of of diversity of different plants, but particularly things like oxeye daisies, things like clovers and buttercups and vetches and so forth. And this is another roadside verge as well. Well, it's not so much a verge, but just a patch of green space just by outside the Royal Mint on Anismardy Industrial Estate. And this is a patch that was regularly mown as well. But this year, during the lockdown, managed to survive and had this lovely display of daisies. And just another example again then, this is near Pontyclean, and this is just a bit of a footpath, and then by the side of it a little bit of strip of green space. And this again was regularly mown for no real need, I suppose, because there's no sort of visual compromise with the road there. And as you can see during the spring, this really nice display of yellow asteraceae, so something like hawksbeard. And you can see as far as the distance goes there, it's a lovely display of yellow. And these plants are really good for things like solitary bees in particular, but also bumblebees and hoverflies. So really nice that these have the opportunity to flower this year when they wouldn't normally because of council mowing. So what we've really learned from the surveys that we've done back in 2017 is that a wide diversity of invertebrates benefit from more sympathetic management of our roadside verges. And what lockdown has really demonstrated, I think, nicely, is that many roadside verges are naturally flower rich, and if you do give them that opportunity, they can become these amazing wildflower-rich places, really important habitats for invertebrates and other wildlife as well. But it's just about giving nature that opportunity, and I'm sure this is the case in many other local authority areas, and I'm sure many of you saw it within your home counties, how flower-rich a lot of verges are that don't normally get that chance. And speaking as somebody that's just a general member of the public, not affiliated in any way to councils, but I do think there are a number of benefits to local authorities by more sympathetic management of roadside verges. And some of these have been touched on in the previous talk, but I do think that this really demonstrates the local authorities' commitment to biodiversity if they're managing road verges for wildlife. It also helps to contribute towards the delivery of key objectives in the action plan for pollinators in Wales. Perhaps most importantly, it improves access to nature, so it's bringing nature into the heart of our urban green spaces, and so it's contributing to that greater feeling of well-being. And for a lot of people that commute by car to places like Cardiff or Swansea, roadside verges might be the only sort of connection they have with the natural environment all day. So it's surprising how beneficial just seeing roadside flowers can be to people's well-being. There's also increased public engagement and awareness of pollinators, which is probably needed more than ever at the moment during the current pollinator sort of crisis. And this also increases support then for local authorities' wildlife work as a result of this better public engagement. And there's also, what I think is really important as well, there are potential savings to be made by reducing the grass cutting management of our roadside verges. And there's probably more work that needs to be done about the cost savings of this. And even if there isn't savings, I think it's still beneficial to do this, and it's certainly not going to be more costly to manage roadside verges in this way. And I know Monmouthshire have been particularly leading the way when it comes to managing roadside verges for wildlife in particular, and I'm sure they found evidence of potential savings to be made by managing road verges more sympathetically and reducing management as well. So just kind of want to just finish really by saying it'd be really great that if we can see more road verges across Wales that look like this, for what people might look at and think are sort of weeds, but are actually really beautiful scenes. So if we can see more of this and sort of less of this horrible unnecessary mowing and cutting of our roadside verges and other green spaces, I think that'd be a really good thing. And hopefully we can sort of keep this momentum going really, and we've seen a bit of a change in the last few years of people's attitudes towards roadside verges, so I'm really hopeful that we can really sort of turn the tide on this and get more of our roadside verges and green spaces into better management for wildlife and for the benefits of people as well. So that's me done. So thank you very much for listening, and apologies for the technical issues with Richard as well.